Andre, pleased to meet you. Where exactly are you based?
Yeah, thank you, Jeffrey. Well, actually, I'm based in the eastern Adriatic coast, and we mostly study the coastline, the continental shelf of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, Montenegro, Slovenia, and Albania, the former Yugoslav states, including one more, Albania.
Okay, I was just looking at your website, and there's just something caught my eye. You describe yourself on the web as a scientist, biology professor, research diver, published author, awarded photographer, entrepreneur, traveler, and then right then you've got parachutist. Which kind?
Yeah, I'm living a full life.
Is that part of your work, or is that just fun? The parachute bit.
Yeah, it's actually for fun.
Okay.
I finished the military parachuting school like 11 years ago.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh, wow. Yeah, excellent. There's one thing I've never wanted to do.
Really?
No.
According to me, it's a bucket list. It's something you must do in your life.
Okay. Now I've got a big bucket, but that's not in it.
I'm so glad that I finished it after the high school, because this year I probably, with this age, better know.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Just talking about your work, I've got here. You're dedicated to the understanding the effects of pollution and development of diseases in sharks. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. Well, most of my studies are actually, we aim to understand and to make certain links between different sources of pollution, like the microplastics, the nanoplastics, the sanitary waste, medical waste during the COVID, even the war waste with a certain disease development, mostly in sharks, skates, and rays. Also, we do a lot of different aquatic taxa in order to develop the specific conservation measures and also revitalization measures that we apply to the different conventions on the regional scales, because we believe that only way to protect the certain taxa, especially the migratory species, could be achieved on the unique legal regional protection. Because if one species is strictly protected in one country and completely unprotected in neighboring, which is quite often a scenario in the Mediterranean Sea, for example, then the conservation cannot be achieved at all. So we're trying to understand the pressures on the treated animals in order to be able to conserve them in more successful and precise ways.
And are you doing this on live or dead animals?
It depends. The field studies are conducted on live animals, but we only observe the different interactions in the water, while the laboratory studies are conducted only and exclusively on the bycatch, which is represented by already dead specimens. So we never kill nor harm any animals for the purposes of the studies.
Right. So how do you get your information from an animal? I mean, what's the process of looking for your data?
Yeah, well, actually, we do the comprehensive laboratory studies with our samples. It's all begin with the macroscopic pathomorphology. So we observe the animal for any visible changes. Afterwards, we do X-rays and the CT scans. And then we do something we call the microscopic pathomorphology, which is actually the histopathology. We cut different parts of the tissue of animals, stain them with different colors, and observe them under the microscope. So by the range of the cells into the tissue, we are able to tell the diseases, same as in the human pathology, of course. And besides, we are also working on the ingested microplastics and nanoplastics in the digestive system. So we cut certain parts of digestive system. For example, in a shark, we do 2 parts of the stomach, the cardia and pylorus. We do the duodenum, which is located in the beginning of the ileum of a shark or Typhozoolus, and we do the rest of the ileum and the colon, and we separate them and try to understand which particles, which fragments, pellets, filaments, or microplastics could be actually could stuck into the digestive system, while which parts of microplastics could easily go through the digestive system. So what we found is quite disturbing, and we are also working in many different species, not only the demersal but also pelagic species, to understand the different breadth of parasitic pollution in the ocean. So it's quite comprehensive.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure it is. So where's your baseline data coming from? How far back is data relevant to you to be able to refer to what you're seeing to today?
Well, actually, we try to publish a lot of papers based from our studies. For example, in the last 9 years, we published over 60 papers from the studies across the Atlantic Ocean. And what we aim to do is we aim to actually have as much a statistical volume sample as we can. For example, when you're working with deep sea species like the rock shark beside my back, it's quite hard to obtain the statistical valid sample, but we are actually trying to contribute to the knowledge in any possible way to make the results not only be published somewhere in scientific term like the peer-reviewed journal or the books that we working each day on, but to actually make a tangible results in ecosystems, to make changes in ecosystem that we will be able to observe in maybe next 10 years. Because if there is no positive changes from our results, then our result is actually zero, no matter the quality, the papers and the projects and everything. So we believe that we have to fight for the tangible results in the advancement of the ecosystems.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, is the future of the sharks, is that disappearing faster than you can gain useful research? I mean, is your research going to be in time, do you think?
Well, it's something that doesn't allow me to sleep at night, but I'm afraid that most of the researchers are actually not quite in time, because we're losing species on the daily basis, not only sharks, skates, and rays, but we are losing the biodiversity on the daily basis. And while we are trying to discover the plausible effects of pollution, the effects of fisheries, we are losing the species, even in the pandemics, because animals don't know about any sort of crisis, lockdowns, etc., and they are being endangered more and more day by day. So especially when we're discussing the sharks, which are one of the most let's say threatened vertebrates and one of the longest living vertebrates, we have like Greenland sharks that may live up to 400 years and get sexually mature at age 150. So if we catch all other species that mature quite lately, like with age 10 or 11, and we have numerous numbers of sharks killed each year, and this mathematics is quite bad when you study it. But I still believe that there is a hope, and that we can actually contribute to the survival of the species that are at the brink of the extinction, especially based on the human's fault.
Yeah, I think most of it is human fault, is it not? It's and so a lot of your work is Mediterranean based. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, what's the situation of sharks in the Mediterranean right now?
It's actually bad. It's bad because the Mediterranean had a lot of different countries and a lot of different political situations, which mean a lot of different governments and a lot of different regulations. And while certain species, as I said, are completely protected in one, they are unprotected in a neighboring country. They are allowed to be catch, etc. There's no protection. There are no revitalization measures. So we have very bad situation with some pelagic shark, and we have also a very bad situation with some demersal sharks, like the angel sharks, for example. But fortunately, in past year, I'm leading the study for the angel sharks in the Adriatic Sea, funded by Foundation Ensemble, and we have discovered a number of juveniles and subadults, which is leading us to believe that there are some nursery grounds that we are exploring right now, and these are one of the best results we have in past 10 years, maybe. So I believe there is a hope for the Mediterranean sharks as well, but situation is alarming.
Did the COVID period help at all with? I mean, I assume fishing. No.
It haven't been helpful at all. Especially because a lot of sanitary and medical waste have been dumped in the oceans by the COVID pandemic. So I think that it might just worsen the situation, not do any better. But when we leave a certain area with just a little human pressure, then the animals try to return to it, and people falsely believe that it is some kind of beneficial for animals, but actually things quite worse with all this waste that is dumped in the ecosystems. Especially the masks, the personal protective equipment, the PPAs, it's all made of plastic, the single-use plastic, so it's probably made situation quite more worse.
Right, that's very sad to hear, but not unexpected by any means at all, of course. So all the information that you gather or your research, who does that go to? And then from there, how does it get to people who can actually make a difference?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I love this question because it's enabled me to explain the pathway we have in our work. It's first of all, we do the extensive scientific studies, we publish the peer review papers, and then through, for example, the European Environmental Agency or the governments with the countries we are closely working on, we are trying to develop or reinforce the existing legal measures. So we work closely with the government, with the policymakers, with the different stakeholders, the conventions even, to actually try to put the results from our studies on the paper. But that's not all, because even if we manage to change certain laws, as happened in certain Eastern Adriatic countries, those laws could only end up as a dead letter on the paper, if you know what I mean. So they mean nothing. So we are trying to, in parallel with the policy making, we are highly involved in the rising awareness and wider public education, because we believe that the conservation actually starts with each of us, and the people are really in need to understand all these why the conservation is urgent for many species and how they can personally contribute. So we work in parallel with the policymakers on the regional and the local scales, and also with the wider public education and rising awareness. But results that we disseminate from our studies goes to different governments, policymakers. Even sometimes we try to change different conventions, especially which are signed between the countries that are others direct interest from our studies and for further conservations, or we are trying to protect certain nursery or breeding grounds. We are trying to protect certain species that are unprotected, or even some feeding grounds if they are very important for different species. So there are many different ways that we're trying to achieve the long-term in-situ conservation.
Mm. Who actually pays for your research?
Well, most of the research are actually funded by many different foundations. So some studies are funded through National Geographic Society, some studies are funded through the Rufford Foundation, through the Discovery Channel, through Explorers Club, Foundation Ensemble, Idea White Foundation, European Union government, different Eastern Adriatic governments, Maltese government, many different stakeholders that we actually have. So we are trying to be as independent as possible, because we believe that only independent science could obtain the high quality results that could lead to direct advancement of the environment.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you actually mentioned governments in that long list of support there, because without governments coming on board, the whole thing is lost, isn't it? So taking the Mediterranean and without getting yourself in any difficulty, is there any one particular country or government who are actually taking all this on board and are saying, yes, we have to change?
Yes, there are actually many. Especially on the Eastern Adriatic Sea, for example, there's a lot of species that have to be protected in Slovenia, in Montenegro, in Albania, in Bosnian coast as well. So yes, there are governments that we actually try to work most closely with, and there are governments that already conducted highly efficient conservation, like the Croatia, for example. So we are developing different regional and sub-regional action plans for certain species, which are highly species specific, and trying to link all those governments to create sustainable solutions.
Right. Yeah. Okay. You do a lot of lectures. Is that to colleges and schools, or general theatres? I mean, who do you lecture to mostly?
It's really dependable. I mostly lecture to colleges, but I also work with the kids. For example, with National Geographic in past 2 years, I've worked with almost 20,000 kids for over 65 countries. So it's super exciting, because I think that the kids are the proper age to start the conservation work with. But I'm also highly involved lecturing at different colleges, universities, with the students, and even both postgraduate and undergraduates, trying to actually empower the next generation of the planetary stewards, which is something that we really need at this moment.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, kids. Lecturing to kids is very important, because I mean, they can't actually do very much, to be honest, except influence probably their parents. And I think that does actually count for a fair bit. But
but actually, they are the generations to come, because the lecturers and especially those young age will stuck somewhere in their head, and they are the actually generations that will hold this planet in maybe 20 years. So yeah, they are important to work with, not only to influence their parents about something that will happen today, but something that will happen in the future. They are future policymakers, they are future scientists, they are future different stakeholders. So yeah, it's important to work from early age. That's what most of us believe. So we focus on kids, especially pre-kindergarten or even the primary schools.
Right. I mean, they certainly are more susceptible to learning and to taking it on board. My only worry is, of course, is that in 20 years' time, things are going to be drastically different. You know, by the time they get influence, it's going to be too late.
Yeah, actually, we share same worries, to be honest. But
yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Well, but I found in the past, where if ever I'm doing lectures or talks or anything, I get two kinds of reactions overall generally. I mean, one, either I get a polite clap at the end, or I get audiences who are really engaged and ask lots of questions and want to know more. Which do you find that happens most to you out of those two things? Or do you always get good reactions?
Actually, luckily, yeah, over past hundreds lectures, we have only the good reactions. But the thing is that a lot of people actually is interesting to learn more, to get somehow involved. But there's an issue with it, because 90% of the auditorium, which is eager to learn more or to get involved, got quit like in maybe few days. It's just because they heard the lectures, they got so empowered about making some positive changes, doing something good, and after 5 days, it's all dropped down and let's go to the beer. So it's happened to most of our students as well, because the student populations are quite interesting for something at the beginning. They see my photos all over the world. They see me diving with sharks. They see me in a fancy laboratories or something, which is actually not important at all, because the results are important. But a vast majority of students also are interested in having a cool photo radar of producing some high quality results, which actually needs you to sit at your computer like 12 hours a day, which I do every day when I'm not in the field or in labs. And that is one of the major issues we have, not only with the students, but with wider public as well. They got highly interested in everything we speak, but after a couple of days or months, this enthusiasm goes rapidly down.
Are you still finding out new information about the shark family regarding pollution, or are you just, well, I say just, are you confirming facts that you already knew?
No, we are, the 80% of our work is dedicated to the new data, and only 20% is dedicated to confirm the studies we have published so far, or even to change our view on some issues. So about 80% is focused on developing new technique, new models, new studies that will blow the spectrum of the knowledge we have.
Right. Yeah. Do you work alone, or are you part of a team?
No, I'm leading 3 research teams of 125 scientists that work beneath me. It's a large multidisciplinary team, and to obtain such results we have wouldn't be possible without all the teams. So whenever I discuss about my results, I always speak about my team and our results, because we have a lot of different profiles: the biologists, pathobiologists, the biologists, veterinary toxicologists, chemists, even mathematicians. So we are able to develop models and publish the results we have.
Right. Yeah. With all of your results, and when you're presenting it to various groups or governments or whatever, do you allow yourself any emotions when you're delivering all this, or have you just got to stick exactly to the facts and not give your opinions? I mean,
yeah, it's a hard one. most professional way will be actually to leave emotions by side, but I think that no one who is passionate about receiving something could 100% leave the emotions behind. So having our results are based on 100% professional skill with no emotion attached, because what we publish is based from the experiments and the studies that we have conducted in exclusively scientific terms. But when we are discussing certain legal changes, policy makers, then to be honest, we quite often we are even sometimes forced to include emotions, because that's how we can fresh different policy makers, because for most of them the scientific papers or the studies that we publish actually doesn't mean a lot, and they are quite unable to understand most of them because they are not scientists. So yes, we sometimes approach with the emotions, even if we think that might be the best way to achieve the results, because all our papers and everything would be just H-index citations and something that drives the ego of a scientist. They won't get any tangible effects without those policy makers. So yeah, no matter how hard it is to actually conduct a scientific study, to publish it, which is actually extremely hard, of course, it's equally important as to reach the policy makers, to force them to make positive changes. So these are two different channels that use different approaches, and I believe that having emotional approach in the policy making is quite good sometimes.
Yeah, that's good to hear. It's I think emotions are an incredibly important part of it. If you just have
Yeah, me
facts
too.
all the time, it's just facts, and it means nothing. I mean, because fish, marine mammals, all the rest of it, sharks, etc., they all have the abilities to feel as we do. All the pain, the anxieties, and everything
Yes, of
else.
course.
So it's important not to ignore that. So that's good. I mean, I find now in today's industrialized fishing, whether it be whales or shrimps, the consumer who actually drives all of this, drives the pollution, the fishing, and everything else, has totally lost any feeling or any empathy with marine life. And it's such a difficult one to get over. Have you any thoughts on that?
Yes, actually, it's good that you mentioned empathy. It's because my work is quite a lot of related with empathy. That's why I forbid to catch and kill animals, because I try to understand the value of each certain life of individual, not only on the group like the population. So yes, I also agree that larger industrialization, the anthropogenic pressures, the touristic seasons, everything that is related to actually the gain is often related to the greed and lust as well. And the most of the people, the vast majority are, this, at least my personal opinion, most of the people have lost completely the empathy, the ability to understand, and they deny to think about these concerns, because they only, the vast majority of people think is actually how to get money, how to get money, how to get money. And that's how we destroy everything else. But we don't focus on what will happen to our kids, for example, next 50 years. And most of the people actually don't think about it. And what I believe, that all these changes in the environment, the pollution, the diseases that it causes, the species extinction caused by human activities, is actually everyone's fault. It's your fault, it's my fault. And now it's the proper time to take those changes to save what we can save. But I also think that people are quite not welcoming it, because they are quite more focused on themselves and only themselves. And the principle, the ecological between ego, but I think the most of the people are looking at the ego. That's why we have such bad situation on the planet. Because otherwise, if people try to live in sustainable development, in harmony, that we wouldn't have this this high impact on the ecosystems, especially some ecosystems that should be the pristine ecosystems, and the world pristine is quite is losing in scientific terms, because wherever you go, for example, in the oceans, you will find traces of pollution. So
Yeah,
the
no,
lack
you
of
do.
empathy and understanding could be one of the maybe very important leads for such situation that we have today.
Yeah. Out of the pollutions that you're finding in shark family, what's the most prevalent one? What's most noticeable?
Plastic.
Plastic.
Plastic, sewage, heavy metals. In certain areas, it's a war waste, but plastic.
And that's ingested?
Yes, most of it.
Yeah. And is that really down to microscopic size now? Is it?
It may vary. It can be the solid plastic that is stuck between the rug and the stomach, or it can be the microplastic or even nanoplastics. Depends on what you see, but you'll find all three types of plastics.
Right. Yes, indeed. And with that, with that information, it always amazes me how fish is still sold as a good, healthy diet. You know, anything from the sea now has to have quite a high pollution factor in one way or another. And yet advertisers, fish producers, whatever, are still allowed by law to totally ignore that fact.
Actually, it's a difficult one, because having the plastic inside doesn't necessarily mean it's unhealthy, because there are the POPs, which stand for the parasitic organic pollutants, that often bind to the microplastics that are severely carcinogenous, toxic, etc. But it's have to be proved. That's why these that's why the law actually allows such statements, because it's quite hard to link certain diseases with certain pollution. Although we know that everything is there's beautiful image. It's extremely sad, but it's illustrate the current state of the plastic pollution on the fish market. The girl buying a fish, and she asked, "May I have a plastic bag, please?" And the fisherman said, "It's already inside." And that's one of the saddest images that you can find online, and it's quite true. But to be able to link these plastic and the POPs and other pollution with the diseases, it is quite different thing, and it's quite harder. So yes, it's a load, and it's quite hard for me also to say, is it toxic or not? I get these questions quite often, and it's quite hard to have the answer without proper scientific results in the background. So what I aim to say is that we found a lot of the severe amounts of pollution inside the different parts of the digestive systems. We are observing changes in the liver, brain, kidney, etc., that we are trying to link with the pollution, and we are in the way to be able actually to make such statements.
Yeah. Andrej, it's been brilliant talking to you. Fascinating what you've been saying. Thank you for that. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're very busy. Just for what's your when are you back in the water? When are you diving again? And what are you diving with?
Well, I really do hope that by the end of May, because I just returned from one field expedition from the waters of Croatia and Bosnia, from Malostonski and Dubrovnik. I'm just hoping that I will be able to go for another one by the end of the month. There's a beautiful expedition that I try to work with the torpedo, with the Malbert electric rays, the torpedo rays, and with stingrays. And my diving is quite different than the other dives, especially the sport diving, because I dive only during the night, just a couple of minutes after the midnight, and I go in the mud where the visibility is often less than half meter. I'm always all alone there with around 100 kilos of equipment, trying to record, take samples, etc. And I'm not diving on the reefs or some blue lagoons, or where most people imagine. I'm spent 90% of my studies deep in the mud.
You've just taken the glamour out of diving. Well, look, I wish you all success, and really all success. And we'll stop there. But once again, thank you very much.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure to discuss with you today.
Cool. Thanks now. Bye-bye.
Thanks, man.